The punch landed with a wet thud against the heavy bag, sending vibrations through the chain that held it to the gymnasium ceiling. Sweat dripped from my forehead onto the worn rubber mats below as I threw another combination. Left hook, right cross, uppercut. The rhythm helped me think, helped me forget about the stack of bills on my kitchen table, and the way my wife Marissa had been looking at me lately, like I was something she'd stepped in. My name is Jack Morton, and at 38, I run Morton's MMA training in the dying mill town of Millbrook, New Hampshire. The gym occupies the bottom floor of what used to be a textile factory, back when this town meant something. Now it's just another forgotten dot on the map, full of boarded-up storefronts and people trying to convince themselves that better days are coming. The bag swayed under my attack, and I was just getting into a good rhythm when my phone buzzed on the bench behind me. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. Damn it, I muttered, unwrapping my hands as I walked over to check the messages. They were from my 15-year-old daughter, Lex, who had a talent for drama that would make Shakespeare jealous. Dad, where are you? Mom's acting weird again. She's on the phone in the garage. Sounds like she's talking to a guy. Dad, seriously come home now. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. The drive to our house on Maple Street took exactly 7 minutes. But tonight it felt like an hour. Our neighborhood was one of the few in Millbrook that hadn't completely gone to hell yet. The houses still had fresh paint, the lawns were mowed, and people still pretended to be happy. I pulled into our driveway and sat in my truck for a moment, looking at the house Marissa and I had bought 12 years ago when we still believed in forever. The garage door was closed, but I could see light seeping from underneath. I walked around to the side door and pressed my ear against it. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. Marissa's voice drifted through the thin wood. Tomorrow night, same place. Jack will be at the gym until at least 10. My blood turned to ice water. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, listening to my wife of 16 years plan her next rendezvous with whoever the hell E was in her contacts. I know, baby. I know it's complicated, but we'll figure it out. I just need a little more time. The conversation continued, but I couldn't hear anymore. My ears were ringing, and my hands were shaking with a rage I hadn't felt since my Marine days. I walked back to my truck and sat in the dark, trying to process what I'd just heard. The front door opened, and Lex came running out. She was tall for her age, with Marissa's dark hair and my stubborn chin. Dad, thank God you're here. Mom's been acting so weird lately. She's always on her phone, and she keeps going out for these mysterious work meetings that last until midnight. Get in the truck, I said quietly. What? Why? Just get in. Lex climbed into the passenger seat, and I started the engine. We're going for ice cream. At 9 o'clock on a Tuesday? Why not? We drove to Dairy Queen in silence. I bought her a Blizzard and got myself a coffee I didn't want, and we sat in a booth under fluorescent lights that made everything look sick and yellow. Dad, what's wrong? Lex asked, studying my face. You look like someone died. Your mother and I are having some problems, I said carefully. Adult problems. Is she cheating on you? The question hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. What makes you ask that? Lex shrugged and stirred her ice cream with a plastic spoon. I'm not stupid, Dad. She's always texting someone called E and smiling at her phone like she's got some big secret. Plus, she bought new underwear last week, the expensive kind. I stared at my daughter, wondering when she'd gotten so observant and hating that she had to be. I don't know yet, I said finally, but I'm going to find out. When we got home, Marissa was in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. She was still beautiful at 36, with the kind of sophisticated look that came from working at Pinnacle Marketing downtown. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail, and she was wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than most people in Millbrook made in a week. Where were you two? She asked without looking up. Ice cream, I said. On a school night? Since when do you care about school nights? You've been working late every night this week. She finally looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. I'm up for a promotion, Jack. You know how important this is to me. Right. The promotion. Lex disappeared upstairs, smart enough to sense the tension. Marissa finished with the dishes and turned to face me, crossing her arms over her chest. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just seems like you've been working a lot of late nights lately. Someone has to. The gym isn't exactly bringing in enough to cover the mortgage. There it was. The dig she'd been saving up. The reminder that I was failing as a provider, that my dreams of running a successful gym were just that, dreams. I'm doing the best I can, Marissa. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're content to just coast along, training a bunch of wannabe tough guys who will never amount to anything. The words stung because there was truth in them. My gym was struggling. Half my clients were kids whose parents could barely afford the monthly fees, and the other half were middle-aged guys trying to recapture their youth by learning how to throw a proper jab. At least I'm not lying about where I spend my evenings, I said. Her face went pale. What's that supposed to mean? You tell me. We stared at each other across the kitchen island, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out how much I knew, how much I suspected. I think you're being paranoid, she said finally, and frankly, it's not attractive. She walked past me toward the stairs, and I caught a whiff of cologne that wasn't mine, something expensive and masculine that made my stomach turn. Marissa. She stopped, but didn't turn around. We need to talk? Soon? I'm tired, Jack. Can we do this tomorrow? Sure, tomorrow. But I knew tomorrow would just bring more lies, more excuses, more late nights at the office. I stood in my kitchen, listening to her footsteps on the stairs, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The man who'd been content to coast along, to accept whatever scraps of affection his wife threw his way, was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who was tired of being taken for granted, someone who was ready to fight back. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in bed next to my wife, listening to her breathe and trying to figure out who E could be. The list of possibilities wasn't long. Marissa worked at Pinnacle Marketing with maybe 20 people, and most of them were women. That left a handful of men, but only one whose name started with E. Evan Klein, her boss. The thought made my jaw clench. I'd met Evan exactly twice, both times at company Christmas parties. He was everything I wasn't: smooth, educated, wealthy. The kind of man who wore $1,000 suits and drove a Tesla. The kind of man who could give Marissa the life she thought she deserved. At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make coffee. While it brewed, I opened Marissa's laptop. She'd left it on the kitchen counter, probably figuring I was too stupid or too trusting to snoop. The password was Lex's birthday, not exactly Fort Knox-level security. Her email was clean, but that didn't surprise me. Marissa was smart enough not to leave evidence lying around in obvious places. I was about to close the laptop when I noticed a folder in her documents labeled Project Phoenix. Inside were dozens of photos from what looked like a weekend conference in Boston. Most were boring work shots, people in suits standing around hotel ballrooms, shaking hands and holding drinks. But there, in the middle of the folder, was a photo that made my blood run cold. Marissa and Evan sitting at a hotel bar. His hand was on her thigh, and she was leaning into him like they were the only two people in the world. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 weeks ago during a weekend when Marissa had told me she was visiting her sister in Portland. I stared at the photo until the coffee maker beeped, then closed the laptop and tried to process what I'd just seen. 3 weeks. This had been going on for at least 3 weeks, probably longer. You're up early. I spun around to find Marissa standing in the doorway, wearing a silk robe that barely covered her thighs. Her hair was tousled from sleep, and under different circumstances I might have found her irresistible. Couldn't sleep, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee with hands that shook slightly. Everything okay? Just thinking about the gym. I've got some ideas for bringing in more revenue. She walked over and poured herself a cup, standing close enough that I could smell her shampoo. That's good. We could use the extra income. How was your sister's weekend in Portland? I asked casually. She froze for just a second, but it was enough. Fine. You know how Sarah is, always complaining about her husband. Did you do anything interesting? Not really, just sister stuff. Shopping, talking, the usual. Every word was a lie, delivered with the kind of casual confidence that told me she'd been practicing. I wondered how many other lies she'd told me over the past few months. How many times she'd looked me in the eye and lied about where she'd been, who she'd been with, what she'd been doing. I should get ready for work, she said, heading back toward the stairs. Big presentation today. With Evan? Another pause. Among others. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table and made a plan. I needed more evidence, something concrete that would prove what I already knew in my gut. More importantly, I needed to figure out what I was going to do about it. The old Jack would have confronted her immediately, would have demanded the truth and begged her to end it. The old Jack would have blamed himself, would have wondered what he'd done wrong, how he'd failed as a husband. But the old Jack was gone. I called my friend Danny Grizz at his bar, The Pit. Grizz had been my sergeant in the Marines, and he knew things about surveillance and information gathering that most people only saw in movies. Jack? Christ, it's not even 7 a.m. Someone better be dead. I need a favor, Grizz. A big one. What kind of favor? The kind that involves following someone without them knowing about it. There was a long pause. Your wife? How did you... Because you've got that tone in your voice. The same one you had right before you knocked the hell out of that kid in Fallujah who was stealing from the mess hall. What's she done? I think she's cheating. You think, or you know? I'm about 90% sure. And you want to be 100% sure before you do something you can't take back. Exactly. Meet me at the bar tonight at 8. We'll talk. I spent the rest of the day at the gym, trying to focus on training my fighters, but failing miserably. My mind kept drifting back to that photo, to the way Marissa had leaned into Evan like she belonged there, like I was just some obstacle to be worked around. At 8 p.m. sharp, I walked into the Pit. It was exactly what you'd expect from a bar in a dying mill town: dim lighting, scarred wooden tables, and the kind of regulars who'd been nursing the same beer for 3 hours. Grizz was behind the bar, polishing glasses with the methodical precision of a man who'd done the same job for 20 years. You look like hell, he said by way of greeting. Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear. He poured me a whiskey and slid it across the bar. Tell me what you know. I told him about the phone conversation, the photo, the lies about Portland. Grizz listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. Son of a witch, he said when I finished. How long you think it's been going on? At least a month, maybe longer. You want me to follow her? Can you do it without being seen? Grizz smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Jack, I spent 2 tours in Middle East tracking insurgents through mountain caves. I think I can handle 1 cheating wife in suburban New Hampshire. What do you need from me? Photos of her and the boyfriend, her schedule, license plate numbers, and Jack? Yeah? You sure you want to know the truth? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know for certain, you're going to have to decide what kind of man you want to be. I finished my whiskey in 1 gulp and stood up. I'm already not the man I used to be, Grizz. The question is what kind of man I'm going to become. The next evening, I told Marissa I was working late at the gym. Instead, I parked across the street from Pinnacle Marketing and waited. At 6:30, she came out of the building with Evan. They walked to his Tesla like they owned the world, and she got in the passenger seat without looking around, like she didn't have a care in the world. I followed them to the Marriott downtown, staying far enough back to avoid detection. They went inside together, and 20 minutes later, Grizz texted me photos that made my hands shake with rage. Marissa and Evan in the hotel bar, his hand on her back. Marissa and Evan in the elevator, her arms around his neck. Marissa and Evan walking toward the elevator bank that led to the guest rooms, looking like a couple who couldn't wait to tear each other's clothes off. I sat in my truck in the hotel parking lot and felt something break inside me. Not my heart. That was already broken. Something deeper. Something that had to do with trust and faith and the belief that people were basically good. My phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. Working late tonight? Don't wait up. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, no problem. Love you? But as I hit send, I realized I was lying too, because the man who had loved Marissa Morton was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who understood that in this world, you either fight back or you get destroyed. And I was done being destroyed. 3 days later, I had enough evidence to bury them both. Grizz had followed them to the Marriott twice more, and each time the photos were more damning. Marissa getting into Evan's Tesla after work. Marissa and Evan holding hands in the hotel restaurant. Marissa leaving the hotel at midnight, her hair messed up and her blouse wrinkled. But the worst part wasn't the photos. It was coming home each night and watching her lie to my face with the kind of casual ease that told me she'd been doing it for months. How was work today? I'd ask. Busy, lots of client meetings, she'd reply, not even bothering to look up from her phone. Anything interesting? Not really. You know how it is. But I didn't know how it was. I'd never cheated on my wife. I'd never looked her in the eye and lied about where I'd been or who I'd been with. I'd never made her feel like she was going crazy for suspecting something was wrong. On Thursday night, I made my decision. Marissa was in the shower, and I could hear her humming some song I didn't recognize. Probably something Evan had introduced her to. I walked into our bedroom and opened her dresser drawer, the one where she kept her jewelry and important papers. Hidden underneath a stack of old birthday cards was a burner phone I'd never seen before. My hands were shaking as I powered it on and scrolled through the messages. There were hundreds of them, going back almost 4 months. The early ones were flirtatious but innocent. By last month, they were explicit enough to make me sick. Can't stop thinking about Tuesday night, the way you felt in my hands. Jack's working late again. We could have the whole evening. I love you too. Soon we won't have to hide anymore. I took screenshots of everything and forwarded them to my own phone, then put the burner back where I'd found it. When Marissa came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on the bed pretending to watch TV. "What are you watching?" she asked, toweling off her hair. "Nothing important." She sat down next to me and I caught a whiff of the expensive body wash she'd started using recently. Another gift from Evan, probably. "Jack, we need to talk about something." My heart stopped. Was she finally going to confess? Was she going to end this charade and tell me the truth? "What about, I think we should consider couples therapy." I stared at her, trying to process what she just said. Therapy? We've been growing apart lately. I can feel it, and I know you can too. Maybe talking to someone would help us figure out how to reconnect. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. She was cheating on me with her boss, planning to leave me for him, and now she wanted us to go to therapy so she could feel better about herself. "You think therapy would help?" I asked carefully. "I think it's worth trying. We owe it to Lex to at least attempt to fix whatever's broken between us." "And what do you think is broken between us, Marissa?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "I think we've stopped seeing each other. Really seeing each other. We're like roommates who happen to share a bed." "Is that how you see me? As a roommate?" "Sometimes." Her voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear it. "I know that's awful to say, but it's the truth. When was the last time we really talked? About something other than bills or Lex or the gym?" I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and scream that maybe we'd stop talking because she was too busy texting her boyfriend. Maybe we'd grown apart because she'd been emotionally and physically checked out of our marriage for months. Instead, I said, "You're right. We should try therapy." "Really? Really? Do you have someone in mind?" I could ask around at work. Maybe Evan knows someone good. Of course, even our marriage counseling would somehow involve her boyfriend. "That sounds great," I said. "Why don't you ask him tomorrow?" The next morning, I called in sick to the gym and drove to Pinnacle Marketing. I knew Marissa's schedule by heart. She had a client meeting at 10, which meant she'd be out of the office for at least 2 hours. That gave me plenty of time to have a conversation with Evan Klein. The Pinnacle offices were everything my gym wasn't. Sleek, modern, expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows, abstract art on the walls, and a receptionist who looked like she'd stepped off the cover of a magazine. "I'm here to see Evan Klein," I told her. "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell him Jack Morton is here. He'll want to see me." She made a phone call, spoke in hushed tones, then hung up and smiled. "He'll be right out." Evan appeared 2 minutes later, and I had to admit he was impressive. Tall, well-dressed, confident. The kind of man who'd never had to worry about money or wonder if he was good enough. The kind of man who could steal another man's wife and sleep peacefully at night. "Jack, what a surprise. Marissa didn't mention you were stopping by." "Marissa doesn't know I'm here." Something flickered in his eyes. "Oh, well, what can I do for you?" "I think we should talk. Privately." He glanced around the reception area, probably wondering if I was going to cause a scene. "Of course, why don't we step into my office?" His office was exactly what I'd expected. Corner location, leather furniture, diplomas on the wall from schools I couldn't afford to visit. He closed the door and gestured for me to sit down, but I remained standing. "So," he said, settling behind his desk like it was a fortress. "What's on your mind?" "My wife, Marissa. Is everything okay?" "You tell me, Evan. Is everything okay with my wife?" He leaned back in his chair, and I saw him make a decision. He was going to play dumb, at least for now. "I'm not sure I understand the question. Let me be more specific. Are you screwing my wife?" The words hung in the air between us like a loaded tool. Evan's face went through several expressions: surprise, fear, calculation, before settling on indignation. "That's quite an accusation, Jack, and frankly, I don't appreciate—" "Cut the crap." I pulled out my phone and showed him one of Grizz's photos. "Tuesday night, Marriott Hotel. You want to explain what kind of work meeting requires you to have your tongue down my wife's throat?" His face went pale, but he recovered quickly. I think you should leave. I think you should stop screwing my wife. Jack, I understand you're upset, but upset? I laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. Evan, upset is what you feel when your team loses the Super Bowl. This is something else entirely. I walked around his desk, and he rolled his chair backward until he hit the window. Up close, he was smaller than I'd thought. Softer, the kind of man who'd never been in a real fight in his life. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. You're going to end whatever this is with Marissa, today, right now. You're going to tell her it was a mistake, that you can't see her anymore, and that she should work on her marriage. And if I don't, I smiled, then I'm going to make your life very uncomfortable. See, you might have money and education and a fancy car, but I have something you don't. I have absolutely nothing left to lose. Are you threatening me? I'm making you a promise. Stay away from my wife or I'll destroy you. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. Jack. I looked back at him. She came to me, not the other way around. She told me her marriage was over, that she was just waiting for the right time to leave. I'm not the villain here. No, I said. You're not the villain. You're just a coward who goes after married women because single ones can see right through you. But don't worry, Evan. I'm not going to hurt you. You're not? No, I'm going to do something much worse. I'm going to let everyone know exactly what kind of man you are. I left him sitting in his office and walked out through the reception area with my head high. The receptionist smiled at me as I passed, and I wondered if she knew what her boss was really like. I wondered if any of them knew, but they would. Soon enough, they all would, because the old Jack Morton might have walked away and tried to pretend this never happened. But the old Jack Morton was dead, and the new one was just getting started. I drove straight from Evan's office to the pit. It was barely noon, but I needed a drink, and I needed to talk to someone who understood what I was going through. Grizz was restocking the bar, getting ready for the lunch crowd that would never come. Most of the factories that used to employ half the town were closed now, and the men who used to drink here during their lunch breaks were either dead, moved away, or drinking at home because they couldn't afford bar prices. You look like you just kicked someone's ass, Grizz said, not looking up from the case of beer he was unloading. Not yet. But the day is young. What happened? I told him about my conversation with Evan, about the photos, about Marissa's suggestion that we try couples therapy. Grizz listened without comment, occasionally shaking his head or muttering under his breath. So what's your play? He asked when I finished. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to confront her with the evidence and see what she says. Part of me wants to just file for divorce and be done with it. And the other part? I was quiet for a long moment, trying to put into words the dark thoughts that had been growing in my mind like cancer. The other part wants to make them both pay. Pay how? I don't know yet. But they humiliated me, Grizz. They made me look like a fool. Marissa's probably been laughing about me with her girlfriends, telling them how pathetic her husband is, how he's too stupid to realize what's going on right under his nose. You don't know that. Don't I? You should see the way she looks at me now. Like I'm something she scraped off her shoe. Like she can't wait to get rid of me so she can start her new life with Mr. Perfect. Grizz poured me a whiskey and slid it across the bar. Jack, I've known you for 15 years. You're not the kind of man who destroys people for revenge. Maybe I am now. No, you're hurt and you're angry, and you have every right to be. But don't let this turn you into something you're not. What if what I wasn't good enough? What if being the nice guy, the loyal husband, the man who always did the right thing, what if that's exactly why I'm in this situation? Before Grizz could answer, my phone rang. It was Lex. Dad, can you pick me up from school? I don't feel good. What's wrong? Can you come get me, please? 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the parking lot of Millbrook High School, watching my daughter walk toward my truck with her head down and her shoulders slumped. She got in without saying anything and stared out the window as we drove home. You want to tell me what's wrong? I asked. Some kids at school were talking about Mom. My blood went cold. What kind of talking? Stupid stuff. Rumors. You know how kids are. Lex, what did they say? She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. Finally, she said, they said she was having an affair with her boss. They said everyone in town knows about it except you. I pulled over to the side of the road and put the truck in park. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I was going to be sick. Dad, is it true? I looked at my daughter. really looked at her and saw that she already knew the answer. She had my eyes and Marissa's intelligence, and she'd probably figured out what was happening weeks ago. Yeah, I said quietly. It's true. She started crying then, not the dramatic tears of a teenager, but the quiet, heartbroken sobs of a child whose world had just fallen apart. I reached over and pulled her into a hug, and we sat there on the side of Route 9 while my daughter grieved for the family we used to be. What are you going to do? She asked when she finally stopped crying. I don't know yet. Are you going to divorce her? Probably. Good. She doesn't deserve you. That night, Marissa came home from work with a smile on her face and Chinese takeout from our favorite restaurant. She was in a good mood, probably because she thought her conversation with Evan had gone well. She probably thought she'd successfully manipulated both of us. How was your day? She asked, setting the food on the kitchen table. Interesting. I had a conversation with Evan Klein today. She froze with a container of lo mein halfway to her plate. What? I stopped by your office. Had a nice chat with your boss about the nature of your working relationship. The color drained from her face. Jack, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear the explanation for this. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos Grizz had taken. Her face went from pale to gray as she scrolled through them. Where did you get these? Does it matter? She set the phone down on the table and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not guilt or shame or regret, defiance. How long have you known? She asked. Long enough. The question is, how long has it been going on? 4 months. 4 months. I repeated the words, trying to process them. 4 months of lying to me. 4 months of sneaking around. 4 months of making me feel like I was going crazy for suspecting something was wrong. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen, Marissa? What was the plan? Were you going to keep screwing him until you found the courage to leave me? Or were you just going to keep both of us on the hook indefinitely? I was going to tell you. When? Soon. I needed to figure some things out first. What things? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally looked up, her eyes were cold. I need more than this, Jack. More than this house, more than this town, more than this life. I'm 36 years old and I feel like I'm dying here. So you decided to cheat on me instead of talking to me about it. What would have been the point? You love this place. You love your gym and your fighters and your small town life. You'd never leave. You don't know that, don't I? When was the last time we talked about the future, about dreams or goals or anything beyond paying the bills and getting through another day? She was right, and we both knew it. We'd stopped dreaming together years ago. We'd stopped being partners and become roommates, just like she'd said. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. So, what happens now? I asked. I don't know. What do you want to happen? I looked at her sitting across from me at the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals, where we'd helped Lex with her homework, where we'd planned our future back when we still believed in it. I want you to leave, I said quietly. Tonight. Jack, I want you to pack a bag and get out of my house. We'll figure out the details later, but I can't look at you right now. I can't sit here and pretend that we're going to work through this. Where am I supposed to go? I'm sure Evan has room at his place. She flinched, like I'd slapped her. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. You made your choice, Marissa. Now live with it. She went upstairs and packed a bag while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the Chinese food that was getting cold. 20 minutes later, she came back down with a suitcase and her purse. I'll call you tomorrow, she said. We need to talk about Lex, about the house, about... No, we don't need to talk about anything. My lawyer will be in touch. Jack, please, don't do this when you're angry. Don't make decisions you'll regret. I stood up and walked to the front door, holding it open for her. The only thing I regret is not doing this 4 months ago. She walked past me without another word, and I watched her drive away in her BMW. Then I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling something that might have been relief. Lex appeared at the top of the stairs. Is she gone? Yeah, good. But as I stood there in the hallway of the house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet, I realized that getting rid of Marissa was only the beginning. Because half the town knew about her affair, which meant half the town thought Jack Morton was a fool. And I was tired of being anyone's fool. 3 weeks after Marissa moved out, I ran into Tom Bradley at the grocery store. Tom had been my friend since high school. We'd played football together, double-dated to prom, stood up in each other's weddings. His wife, Sarah, had been Marissa's maid of honor. "Hey, Jack," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. Listen, man, about what happened with Marissa. I'm really sorry. If there's anything Sarah and I can do." "Thanks, but we're good." There was an awkward pause. Tom shifted his weight from one foot to the other and looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "The thing is," he said finally, "Sarah and I are having a party next weekend. Just a small thing, nothing fancy. But Marissa and Evan are going to be there, so maybe it would be better if I stayed home." "It's not personal, Jack. It's just, awkward." I stared at him, this man who'd been my friend for 20 years, and felt something cold settle in my chest. "Right, awkward. Maybe after things settle down, after the divorce is final, we can all figure out how to what, Tom? How to be friends again. How to pretend that my wife didn't cheat on me with her boss while you and Sarah knew about it and said nothing." His face went red. "We didn't know. Not for sure. Bees, Sarah's been Marissa's best friend since college. You're telling me she didn't know her best friend was having an affair? Sarah suspected something might be going on, but she didn't tell me. She didn't warn me. She just let me walk around town looking like an idiot while everyone else knew the truth. It wasn't our place to get involved in your marriage." "No, but it was your place to choose sides after it ended, and you chose her." I walked away before he could respond, leaving my half-filled cart in the produce section. But the conversation stayed with me for days, eating at me like acid. That weekend, I drove past Tom and Sarah's house and saw the cars in the driveway: Marissa's BMW, Evan's Tesla, a dozen other vehicles belonging to people I'd thought were my friends. They were all in there together, probably talking about poor Jack Morton and how pathetic it was that he couldn't keep his wife happy. On Monday, I went to see my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Morse, who had a reputation for being ruthless in divorce cases. "I want to take her for everything," I told her. "That's not really how it works in New Hampshire, Jack. We're an equitable distribution state, which means I don't care about the law. I care about making her pay for what she did." Patricia leaned back in her chair and studied me. "You want revenge? I want justice." "No, you want revenge, and I understand that. But revenge is expensive, and it's not always satisfying. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well." Easy for you to say. "You're not the one whose wife was screwing her boss while the whole town watched and laughed." "You're right. I'm not. But I am the one who's going to represent you in this divorce. And I'm telling you that going scorched earth might not be the best strategy." "What would you do? If it was your husband?" She was quiet for a moment. "I'd make sure he regretted it for the rest of his life." "Then help me do that." Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia and I built a case that would destroy Marissa's reputation and her financial security. We documented the affair, the lies, the money she'd spent on hotels and dinners and gifts for Evan. We subpoenaed her phone records, her credit card statements, her email accounts. But that wasn't enough. Not for what she'd done to me, to our daughter, to our family. I started making phone calls to Marissa's clients at Pinnacle Marketing, letting them know that their account manager was having an affair with her boss, to the partners at the firm, asking if they were aware of the ethical violations happening under their roof, to Evan's wife, yes, he was married too, something I discovered during my research. Mrs. Klein was very interested to learn about her husband's extracurricular activities. Within a week, both Marissa and Evan were fired from Pinnacle Marketing. The official reason was restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. You can't run a marketing firm when your employees are making headlines in the local paper for their sordid affair. Marissa called me, screaming, "You destroyed my career! I'll never work in this industry again." "You destroyed your own career when you decided to sleep with your boss." "This is insane, Jack. You're ruining both our lives out of spite." "No, I'm making sure there are consequences for your actions, something your parents clearly never taught you." "What about Lex? What about our daughter? Do you think this is good for her?" "Our daughter is fine. She's living with me, going to school, doing her homework. She's not the one who blew up our family." "I want to see her." "Then call your lawyer and set up visitation. But don't expect her to be happy about it. Lex knows what you did, Marissa. She knows you chose Evan over us." The call ended with her sobbing, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, no guilt. Just a cold emptiness where my emotions used to be. But I wasn't done yet. Evan's wife divorced him and took half his assets, including the Tesla he was so proud of. Without his job at Pinnacle, he couldn't afford the payments on his downtown condo. I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved back in with his parents in Massachusetts. As for my former friends, the ones who'd chosen Marissa's side, I made sure they understood the cost of that decision. Tom Bradley's construction company had been hoping to get the contract for renovating the old mill into condos. I had connections with the development company. The owner's son trained at my gym, and I made sure Tom's bid was rejected. Sarah Bradley's catering business depended on referrals and word of mouth. I made sure the word of mouth wasn't positive. Amazing how quickly a business can fail when people start questioning the owner's integrity and loyalty. One by one, I systematically destroyed the lives of everyone who had betrayed me. Not through violence or illegal activities, but through the kind of social and economic warfare that small towns specialize in. By Christmas, Marissa was working as a waitress at a diner 2 towns over. Evan had moved to Florida to live with his brother. Tom and Sarah Bradley were talking about bankruptcy. And me? I was exactly where I'd always been. In my gym, training fighters, living in the same house, driving the same truck. But I was different now. Harder. Colder. The kind of man who understood that in this world you either destroy your enemies or they destroy you. Lex noticed the change in me, of course. She was too smart not to. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked one night over dinner. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Why?" "You're different. Since Mom left, you're like, I don't know, scary." "Scary how?" "Like you don't care about anything anymore. Like you could do anything and not feel bad about it." I looked at my daughter, this beautiful, intelligent young woman who was half me and half the woman who'd betrayed us both, and I realized she was right. I had become someone who could do anything without feeling bad about it, and I was okay with that. Sometimes, Lex, the world teaches you that being nice gets you nothing but pain. Sometimes you have to become someone harder to survive. But what if you become someone you don't like? Then at least you become someone other people respect. She was quiet for a long moment. I miss the old you. The old me was weak. The old me let people walk all over him. The old you was my dad. I'm still your dad. Are you? The question hung in the air between us, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt a crack in the ice around my heart. But I couldn't afford to feel guilty now. I couldn't afford to second-guess what I'd done. Because in 6 months, I'd gone from being Jack Morton the fool to Jack Morton the man you didn't cross. And that transformation had cost me everything. My wife, my friends, my old life. But it had given me something too. It had given me power. The power to make people pay for their betrayals. The power to ensure that no one would ever underestimate me again. And as I sat there looking at my daughter, I realized that was a trade I was willing to make. Even if it meant becoming someone I didn't recognize in the mirror. Even if it meant becoming the villain in my own story. Because sometimes being the villain was better than being the sufferer, and I was done being anyone's sufferer ever again.